Well, welcome to Authentic Manhood, session 1 of 5. This is seriously one of my favorite nights of the year. We do this twice a year, and I just love being back together with you guys. If I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you, I know most of you, and in some cases that's a good thing. In some cases, it's an okay thing, But I don't know all of you, so if we haven't met, my name's Ryan Ventura, and I've been here at Horizon for about 8 years. I'm our family ministry director, so I lead all the young, cool, hip pastors like Alex Bowman. Where's Alex at? Raise your hand, Alex. They hang out with our kids and teenagers, because I'm just too old to do that anymore. But a little bit about me, so I'm going backwards, go this way. So that's my family. So in case you don't know who I am, I always like to know who the heck's talking to me. So married 22 years to Becky. We got 4 kids. We're in the thick of it. Anybody raising teenagers right now out there? Yep, we got a 19-year-old, 17-year-old, 15-year-old, and a 9-year-old, okay? 9-year-old is where your wife really wanted you to get the surgery, but you didn't get the surgery kind of scenario. Just throwing that out there. She was not happy when that came down the way it came down, all right? It did play out well for me, though, because he was a C-section, and then she got her tubes tied. So I was like, hey, it was like a 2-for-1, But anyway, but that's me. But really, I don't matter, because really, authentic manhood is about you guys. Like the whole point of this is for you guys, that you came out to meet some other men, to think about life, to think about career, maybe think about how faith interplays with that. And it's an awesome thing. And here's where the heavy lifting will happen in these authentic manhood sessions, okay? I'm just like a tour guide. I'm just up here, I'm gonna walk through stuff. It's gonna feel like a game show at points where I'm out here talking at tables like an idiot. It's gonna be a ton of fun, but the heavy lifting that happens around the tables. That every week, 3 times, you'll have what I call table time, where you guys sit and you're gonna talk about a prompt, a question, and you'll get anywhere from 5 to 8 minutes to talk at your table. And that's, every year when we do a survey, that is what everyone lists as their favorite part of this. Okay, it's not the handsome presenter, okay? It's not the amazing chicken wings and the beer apparently no one wants, It's the table time. So it invites you to participate in that. And for some of you guys, if you're a little introverted, it might be, you're gonna have to challenge yourself a little bit to speak up here and there. And that's okay. I'm an introvert, believe it or not. It's crazy, God has me up here talking in front of, a couple dozen men, but I'm energized by smaller groups, and maybe you're like me, and that's okay. Maybe interject a couple times a night. You don't have to rule the table. And for some of you, you're extroverts, and you're going to need to, from time to time, put your hand in your mouth because you're going to be talking so much, and everybody else is going to be like, hey, stop talking. But just encourage you to challenge yourself to connect with other men. And we're going to start with our first table time of the night, okay? And it's going to be, and I did this in my small group, and it was super fun. I want each guy to take 30 seconds, and I want you to tell the table your worst job ever, okay? And here's my only rule these first 2 weeks. So there's no rules in authentic manhood, besides don't burn the place down. But don't tell anyone at your table what you do for a living for at least 2 weeks. Okay, because here's what I've learned about men, is as soon as we start dealing out what we do for a living, we start measuring one another, right? And you're like, oh, you're in that field. Yeah, I did that when I was 18. That must be nice, right? And we just do that. So I'd encourage you for at least 2 weeks, don't share at your table what you do professionally. Just get to know people, okay? Get to know them by name, by story. So you got about 5 minutes here, so you guys are going to have to hurry, all right, to get through your worst job ever. Don't go into all the gory details. Just share your worst job ever. Go ahead, you're in. So I said 5 minutes. I actually gave you 8. And the table with 25 guys at it got through theirs twice, they said. They were listing their second worst job, third. Would love, what was a crazy job at your table? So somebody out someone else. Okay, this isn't that embarrassing. What was a crazy job at your table? You got to say
Aaron,
it.
So Aaron worked at Old Country Buffet, and he said at the end of the shift, he was so covered in grease, he had to take 2 showers.
Nice.
And that was in high school.
Disgusting, right? Nice. That was a good one. Somebody else. Somebody at your table, Brian. What did somebody at this fine table of gentlemen do?
You had to lay on his back and do fire caulking in the middle of the night at construction sites.
I don't even know what that is, but it doesn't sound fun. Fire caulking. All right, Matthew. You need a lot of Advil after that, I bet. Somebody back here. What about this table? Dan, what about your table?
Was cleaning grease pits at a fish and chips place.
Ew. Anybody else love Long John Silver's, but your wife won't let you go there? Like, I love Long John Silver's, and I cannot convince her to go there. It can be my birthday or anniversary. Well, I probably shouldn't go on my anniversary, but did you have a good one here? All right, Art, last one here, Art. Drop the mic. Don't literally, but that's a saying nowadays.
When I was working for an engineering company, I was a pipe fitter apprentice, and sometimes the welds on pipes weren't good, and I remember climbing into 18-inch pipes when I was thin, and I'd have to go 50, 60 feet grinding welds in the middle of summer. But I just remember my worst job in high school. I worked at this restaurant in Texas where I grew up, and we had barrels of shrimp would come in, and we had to devein it with our fingers. And to this day, I will not eat boiled shrimp or anything. My wife knows it. It has to be fried or some other way, just because it brings back that memory.
Will you climb in a pipe to this day? Okay. I don't think the shrimp thing tops the pipe thing. I'm just saying. That sounded pretty horrible. Well, good deal. Hopefully that was fun to hear some of the terrible things people at your table have done. And isn't that true? We all have jobs over the years that we just don't love, man. Well, this season of Authentic Manhood, every season is about a different subject matter, and this one is about work. A man and his work. And the books that you have in front of you, if you don't have a book, I would say raise your hand and somebody will bring them to you, but there's nobody back there. So you can walk back there and get a book. But the way we use the books is they're like a backbone for our time together. So actually tonight we'll use quite a few of the fill in the blanks. But as we go from week to week, there might be some weeks where we use like 60, 70% like we will tonight. There might be some weeks where we only use 30 or 40%. And that's okay, because I don't think we get a lot out of just filling in blanks. I think we get a lot out of talking to each other and thinking. So I'm trying to create an experience towards that end. But we're going to be talking about a man and his work. And one of the things I want to do quickly, and this is why I had you scan a QR code, is this is kind of like, when you start a new doctor and they just do a lot of tests to figure out what the baseline is. I would love a temperature check right now of just where we are with work. So I want you to finish this phrase on your phone through the QR code. Again, I was selling it for a reason. Work is, and just put whatever comes to mind. So work is amazing, work is terrible, work is, you name it. And they will pop up here in a word cloud format, because I would love to just know the temperature of the room right now as we think about work. Hard. Good. Not good, I guess, Busy, but you're here tonight eating chicken wings. Work is blessings, long, necessary. We'll talk about that tonight. Stressful, frustrating, exhausting. I see something that says money something, but it keeps moving. So it's hard about these word clouds as they move on you. Work is a grind. Work is God-given. Work is long. Work is not fun. Work is unchallenging. Work is selfless. Work is never ending. People are dumb. I don't take any offense, okay? Whoever that was, I'm just glad you didn't put Ryan as dumb. So thanks for that. Not that anybody should get an idea here, okay? Important, exciting, identity, stressful. The bigger they are, the more people are putting it, FYI. So necessary, rewarding, all of those are pretty, coming from a few guys here. Fulfilling, exciting, difficult, uninspiring, nonstop. So we're seeing a lot of different things here as we talk about and think about what work is. And over the next 5 weeks, we're going to be looking at this topic of work, and we're really going to be talking about 3 things. We're going to be talking about our hearts, our minds, and our hands. That how we feel about work matters, right? And it'll matter greatly for our enjoyment, our happiness, our productivity, all of that. How we think about our work matters, and how we go about our work matters. And we're going to be looking at all of those ideas together here over the next 5 weeks. because we're all coming in, right? That word cloud. Some of us are loving work. It's the best ever. And some of us are like, this is terrible. I'm exhausted. It's a drag. I'm uninspired. We'll have some gold for you no matter where you're at on that. And I think there'll be some great stuff here no matter if you're a student right now. We have some 19-year-olds that are like in classes. I think we got a high school student back there. And there'll be applicable stuff if you're like retired and you've been retired longer than you worked, right? There's going to be a lot of good stuff here for all of us. But we're going to start with our hearts. And that was the most manly heart I could find. It's a heart made out of coffee beans, okay? My favorite. Sometimes coffee is the only thing that gets me out of bed in the morning. But as we think about how we feel about work, I thought of one of my favorite movie scenes from a movie called Office Space. All right? So I want you to watch it. Sam, let's pray to baby Jesus that this works, all right?
Would you walk us through a typical day for you?
Yeah.
Great.
Well, I generally come in at least 15 minutes late. I use the side door. That way Lumberg can't see me. And after that, I just sort of space out for about an hour. Till I'm
Space out?
Yeah, I just stare at my desk. But it looks like I'm working. I do that for probably another hour after lunch, too. I'd say in a given week, I probably only do about 15 minutes of real, actual work.
Peter, would you be a good sport and indulge us and just tell us a little more?
Oh, yeah. Let me tell you something about TPS reports. The thing is, Bob, it's not that I'm lazy. It's that I just don't care.
Don't care?
It's a problem of motivation, all right? Now, if I work my ass off and Initech ships a few extra units, I don't see another dime. So where's the motivation? And here's something else, Bob. I have 8 different bosses right now.
I beg your pardon?
8 bosses.
8?
8, Bob. So that means that when I make a mistake, I have 8 different people coming by to tell me about it. That's my only real motivation, is not to be hassled. That and the fear of losing my job. But you know, Bob, that'll only make someone work just hard enough not to get fired.
Would you bear with me for just a second, please?
Okay.
What if, and believe me, this is so hypothetical, but what if you were offered some kind of a stock option equity sharing program? Would that do anything for you?
I don't know, I guess. Listen, I'm gonna go. It's been really nice talking to both of you guys.
Absolutely. The pleasure's all on this side of the table, trust me.
Good luck with your layoffs, all right? I hope your firings go really well.
Excellent. Great. Wow.
Man, anybody ever had a review go down like that? I love that. And you see Peter there, like he's feeling stuff about his job, right? Like there's feelings going on there. He's thinking stuff about his job, and he's going about his job in a certain way, right, with his hands. And I wish I could walk in a review like that, but I don't think my boss would love it, and he's here, so that probably wouldn't be great. But we're going to start on page 10. So like I said, tonight we'll be in the books a little more than nights in the future, to just kind of set a baseline for what we're talking about. But we're talking about our hearts, and this is kind of one of those no-duh statements that you hear, right? And you're like, yeah, that work is a dominant force. Dominant, like if it's capitalized and bolded, that's your little blank. If you love filling in blanks, man, this book is for you. It's a dominant force in your life, right? Every man creating tensions that must be balanced. Don't you feel educated now? Isn't that like sort of a no-duh statement where you're like, pretty early on in life, didn't you realize that if someday you wanted to get a woman to marry you, have sex with you, have babies and a family, then you probably had to start working, right? Like, didn't that dawn on you? You're like, I just can't keep smoking pot and playing video games. I got to go do something. My wife, preferred I had a job before she said yes. It just kind of works that way. This is one of those no-duh things about life. And here's another no-duh one. Work can be exhilarating, fulfilling, and purposeful. I don't know if I saw a little bit of purposeful in our word cloud and a little bit of fulfilling, but I don't know if I saw any exhilarating, right? Can you remember the last exhilarating meeting you've been in, Ron? Like that was exhilarating, you know, like the eco team meeting, that was, woo, baby, right? Like it just lit me up, right? Like not so much sometimes, right? That a lot of times work is just steady progress heading in the same direction day after day. And kind of the way I see it and the way I'm explaining it for us to think about is that really with work in our lives, this dominant force, there's really only three options. It's you're preparing to work, right? You're in school, you're pivoting between careers, you know, you're trying to figure out what's next. You're actively working, right? And some of us like Doug are like slowing it down a little bit, not quite retired, but not quite like in the thick of it. Or you're retired and you're resting from work. You've already done all your work, right? Nelson, you're like, I'm just retired, living it up, reading Garfield comics. It's amazing. But as you think about work, like, couldn't there be more? I guess is my question. Like, do you ever lay your head down on your pillow at night and you just think like, there's got to be more than this, right? Like, it doesn't always feel that fulfilling. It doesn't always feel that exhilarating and purposeful. Could there be more? And that's what we're going to be looking at as we think about our hearts and work. That we want to give you a new perspective of the nature and purpose of work. Like, could it be possible to feel differently about your career, work in your life than you do right now? Like, maybe you're loving it, and you're like, I could be teaching this way better than you. I'm loving my job. But I would guess there's a good majority of us from the word cloud that are kind of in the middle or even struggling. Could you get to a place where, like, you're feeling-wise in your heart, you're, like, liking it. You're loving work. It's a good thing. So I want to ask a question here to help us think about this. Actually, four of them. We're going to be looking at what's truly the role of work in our lives. And I don't love shoulds, because I feel like you come to meetings like this and you get a lot of shoulds. I like could, because could is inspirational and aspirational. Not like, hey, you should feel this way about work tomorrow. But no, what could it feel like to actually enjoy it? How could we think about it? And how could we go about it? But I want to get from you guys, like, what do you want as you think of your heart and your feelings? And I know we're all men and we're super feely touchy, right? I mean, you guys have been holding hands under the table and singing Kumbaya. But we do have feelings, and we have, our hearts are involved in our work. Like, what do we want from work? Okay, so I'll start with the easy one just to get out of the way. So we want money, right? Because I like having a roof over my head and chicken wings to eat. But what else do we want from work? Like, what are we hoping that it will offer us back once we get out of money, retirement? What was that? Gratification. That's a good one. Somebody else. Recognition. Make a difference. It's gonna be hard to spell. Calm. I need a scribe up here writing stuff down for me. This is good. Respect, right? That's a big one. We had more money, so I'll put money plus. There you go. Collaboration. Isn't there something in the heart of every man that you feel that, right? Where you just have to provide. You want to provide, right? Like any one of us would probably climb into 18-inch pipes. I'd have to squeeze myself down. It'd involve a lot of grease. But I might get there if I had to feed my kids. Positive outcomes was a good one we're going to hit, but security, that's great. Got my clicker in my pocket, which is good. So one of them that comes up here in our book is this idea of we want to be successful, right? Like if you've ever been in a job or a role where you feel like you're failing for more than a short period of time, like that really sucks, doesn't it? Like it's hard to stay happy. It's hard to keep your boss happy, right? It's hard to be happy at home if you feel like you're failing. Success, Anything else? These are good. What about the back of the room? Let me hear one from way back there, Rick Bird. Anything at your table? It's another time zone. Satisfaction. This is like a high-pressure spelling test right now. That's what I'm feeling. Yeah, Doug. It's a fellowship. It's my favorite ship. Mentoring, right? Somebody ahead of you, somebody behind you. We talked about that 2 seasons ago in Authentic Manhood, the idea of we all need fathers in our lives and sons in our lives. Art. Travel. All right. Depends on the season of life, right? Young kids, it's hard. Yeah, Stu. To be in charge. Yeah, I think our hearts kind of long for that, right? I'm running out of boardroom here, though. A couple more. Freedom, role model. Role model over here. One more on the tip of somebody's tongue. Anything? Purpose? Thank you, Pat. Trick. Purpose, right? So there's a lot of things here that maybe our hearts long for when it comes to work, career, all of that. And maybe yours doesn't long, like I never have longed to travel, for instance, you know, and that Art, that was something he longed for. But there's a few that as you talk to men and you think about your own heart that come up, and one of them is definitely success. But beyond that, and I think you see those up here too represented, is that we want our work to be purposeful. We want to be accomplishing stuff that matters, don't you? Right? Like even if it's whatever you're doing, like you're laying mulch, like you want to do a good job and like cover the ground you were supposed to cover and have the person that's paying you be like, good job, I like that, it looks good. Right? We want it to be purposeful and we want it to be significant. Those are blanks on page 10. I try to put page numbers there to help you. Well, I want you guys to chew on this, okay? So I want to do a little table talk here again, where in your table, I want you to think of these 3 words, which again, I think you see pretty well represented up here in what we listed. And I want you to wrestle with, like, do you agree that those are kind of 3 of the main ones? And then which one of those matters the most to you right now? Or if you're retired and like you haven't been in a job in 10 years, which one mattered to you most when you were still in your last role, okay? It'll take about 8 minutes, so toss those questions around. All right, let's pull back together, These guys are my litmus test. If they're done, then you probably, you guys could be done. Not should be, because I don't want to throw any guilt or blame around here, but if Ben and his table are done, then we're good. Who really resonates with success? Like, who is that a driver at the heart level where you're like, man, I am driven by success in what I do? Zach, having managed you, I'd say, yes, that's true. I see that. Whose purpose? Like, who at your table would you feel like, man, purpose is what drives what I do in my decisions? Yeah, what about significance? Yeah, right? And all together, it's like an amazing ice cream sandwich of heart desire, right? The things that we long for out of work. And I would say that these are written into our DNA as men. There's other things too, but I think these are 3 core ones that we're all longing for in different ways in what we do. And my experience has been, I'm 48, is in my years, like if I don't have those going on, it's hard to stay somewhere for long, right? Like money can only be so much of a driver for so long, and you'll do what you need to feed your family, put a roof over their heads, but at some point, like, man, if these are all lacking or whatever your main one is lacking, it's going to be really hard to keep doing what you're doing and to do it well. You're going to be grumpy. People aren't going to like hanging out with you. So the heart is involved in work and career, and we're going to continue to think about that. But we're going to shift gears now a little bit to our minds and how we think about it. And as you think about that idea of us all having these feelings, these drives within us, there's a great C.S. Lewis quote that I thought about. So C.S. Lewis, if you're not familiar with him, was a Christian apologetist from, I think he died, the day Kennedy was shot. And nobody really knew about it because Kennedy was shot. So it's this weird thing. But he's written the Chronicles of Narnia and all kinds of other amazing books. But he has this great quote that John Kirby is going to read to us, okay? So look at that, John. You didn't know you were participating tonight.
Oh, it's right up here. I
Yeah,
was like,
yeah,
where
there.
is it? Creatures are not born with desires unless satisfaction for those desires exists. A baby feels hunger. Well, there is such a thing as food. A duckling wants to swim. Well, there is such a thing as water. Men feel sexual desire. Well, there is such a thing as sex. C.S. Lewis.
Thank you. Good job. Isn't he a great reader? Man, he's so good. See, that's collaboration. Somebody said collaborative at work, so we're doing that, John. Okay, so I love this thought that, like, no creature is born with a desire when there's not a satisfaction for that desire that was created to match it, right? So the fact that, like, 80, however many men are sitting in this room, that all of us would say, hey, those three things are pretty, at least one of those is a core desire in my heart, probably tells me that that's kind of the way we were meant to associate with work and career and life. And there's definitely times where we don't feel that. And sometimes that's just the up and down of life. And sometimes I think it's the disconnect of maybe how we think about work and career. Okay, and that's what we're going to explore a little bit now, is the way that we think about it versus the way that God might think about it. So again, the desire for success, purpose, and significance equals the fact that there's a design, how it could work, right? I think it's maybe how God designed it to work, should work, but it could work that way. Like, wouldn't it be nice to feel those things in your work and in your career? Page 26. So you're going to jump ahead a chapter. One of the curveballs that John Kirby likes to throw at me is he says, hey, there's 6 chapters in this book, but we're going to do it in 5 chapters and you'll figure it out, okay? And then I get to do that, so it's fun. That's what we're doing here. So jump to chapter 2. Somebody want to read that for me? I'll even let you use the microphone. It'll be fun. Thank you. Hunter, you're now my favorite person at this table. Just throwing that out there.
From God's perspective, work is more than just a job. It's a vocation.
All right. Well, what the heck's a vacation, right? And not just a synonym for work, career. Well, the Greek on vocation is the word klesis, is how I'm pronouncing it. If you're a Greek scholar and you're saying it's klesis, I'll go with you on that. But I think it's klesis, okay? And it means calling. That, like, if we're made with this desire for these things in our heart that isn't always being met in our current work situation, then maybe we're not thinking about it the right way. Maybe there's a difference between a job and a calling. Okay, and stick with me here, because this is going to get really cool, I think. Where am I getting this from, Ryan? Like, are you just pulling this out of your nose? Well, no, in the Bible, what's really cool about the Bible is it's God's words. That's what Christians believe, that it's this God speaking to us still. And it's ancient wisdom that speaks to everything in life, from career to marriage to love to parenting to how we interact with each other to what our purpose is in being born, being a part of this world, all of that. In this verse I love because this speaks to calling and it speaks to vocation. And it could be a little bit of a different mindset shift as you think about your life and how you approach your career or the work that you're doing now, even in retirement. Benjamin, will you read this for me? He's like, learn to never make eye contact with the guy up front with the microphone.
For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared for us beforehand, that we should walk in them.
Nice. Thank you. So this is a verse that gets at this idea of calling. And what's really cool, and I know you guys are real, emotional and feely, touchy guys here. For we are his workmanship, that word workmanship in the Greek is poema, which who can tell me what you think that word is in the English? Poema, I think is how it's pronounced. What does it sound like? Poem. It literally is saying that we are God's poem. Okay, and I know you're like, I don't really, poems are kind of wimpy and girly maybe. Think Beowulf, okay, if you're thinking of like a really manly poem, okay? Like God wrote a manly poem when he wrote you, all right? That this verse is telling us that we are God's poem. That's personal is what we're going to look at. That God's calling on our lives, our vocation is personal. created in Christ Jesus for good works, and then check this out, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. That like what the Bible is saying here is that like not only did God create you and you're this poem that he's created, this masterpiece, but he also created something for you to do with your life. When did he come up with it? Beforehand. That God knew on February 23rd, 2025, that I'd be standing in Horizon in front of a bunch of guys talking about this, that this is the good work that he prepared for Ryan Ventura beforehand, which is really cool. So I could have a job at Horizon. Yeah, I work here. It's what I do. Or I could have a calling. Okay, and you don't have to work at a church to have a calling. You could have a calling to be a pharmaceutical salesman. And as we think of this on page 26, a vocation, and I'm trying to help you think of the difference between a job and a vocation or a calling. Okay, a vocation is personal and purposeful. Personal, well, why is it personal, Ryan? Well, because God said, hey, I prepared these good works for you to do beforehand. Before you were even born, I knew you were going to do this. This is the path I want you to follow. It's personal. And then it's purposeful. Well, why is it purposeful? Well, because the God of the universe prepared these good works for you to do. So it's important stuff. It's personal. God calls every man to work. It's part of his plan for our lives. Don't you feel that, right? Like I remember feeling that in my 20s, just like, I just need to work. I don't know why, I just need to, it's just this thing in me. I struggle, I don't know about you, it's hard to rest sometimes. Do any of you guys struggle to rest? It's like a day off, and you're like, I could just sit on the couch and do nothing. Your wife might even give you permission, just lay around, honey, be lazy, you've been great, right? Anyways, yeah, my wife doesn't do that very often, to be honest. But it's so hard to just sit there. And I'll be like, I should totally rest. And you ask Chris, I'm off on Fridays, and it's hard to not come in on Fridays and do stuff because I drop my kid off at MVCA at 8 a.m. I'm like, well, the office is 200 yards away. Might as well just drive over. I'll just be there for a couple minutes, That it's really hard to not work. That I think God put that into us, that it's personal, but it's also purposeful. Page 26, it's more than just an endless to-do list. It's participating in something that God is doing in the world through us. A vocational perspective allows you to bring a totally different mindset to work. It reshapes everything you do in your work. And again, we're thinking about our minds and the way we think about what we do. I wonder right now for you, if you think about your job as personal and purposeful, or if you just think about it it's just my job. That's what I do. Could things be different in your mind if it was a vocation instead of just a job? And here's the beautiful thing, is it doesn't really matter what you do, right? I remember thinking about what I was going to do with my life when I was younger, and it's you think you got to do these big, huge things to make a difference, right? Oh man, I'm going to do this, I'm going to go there, I'm going to have that job, I'm going to make that much money, and that starts to become the bullseye you're aiming at. Well, what's beautiful about this idea of calling is you could work at McDonald's and have a calling that could be personal and purposeful. Right, I love the quote from Mother Teresa. This is the correct one. It says, not all of us can do great things, but we can do small things with great love. A lot of times people quote that as small things done with great love can change the world, which looks really good on a church t-shirt or something. But this is the real quote. And she's right. Not all of us can do huge, great, big, huge, monumental things with our lives, right? I'm trying to gently break that to my teenagers right now. You're probably not going to play in the NBA, Jack. Sorry. Your mom's 5'1" and I'm 5'11". I know that's your dream, and I'm not going to pour water on it. Go for it, man. I'm pushing them. But at the end of the day, I'm one in a bazillion guys wind up doing that, especially when they're 5'9" white guys, right? There's not a whole lot of 5'9" white guys in the NBA. But maybe your love for basketball, God could use that in a personal and purposeful way, and you can be a coach someday, or you can be a trainer someday, and you can grow and lead and foster and mentor the boys that you work with, right? That it's small things can be done with great love and cause a huge impact. think about the person that you would say is probably most impactful in your life. So take a second here. Take 5 seconds. So think about that person. Maybe it was 50 years ago. Maybe it was 10 years ago. Everybody got that person in their mind? Did that person do great, big, monumental things? Were they like well known around the world? Did they walk into rooms and people are like, there they are? Or was that person probably a quiet, unassuming, steady force in your life? Right, I would bet for most of us, if I could go around the room, probably 90% of us, that person was just a normal, everyday mom, dad, uncle, neighbor, coach, postman, doctor, accountant, right? Like, they weren't like these big, huge jobs, these big, huge, important people. They were people that were doing small things that were personal and purposeful. So I want you guys to throw around that idea at your tables. I want you to throw around right now, or again, if you're retired, maybe the last role you had, if you're being honest, like, was work really more just a job? Or were there elements where you started to feel like this is personal, like this is like what I was kind of made to do, and it's purposeful, like I'm accomplishing like good stuff, right? Or is it just a job? You know, and again, I've been there. I've been in both of those camps, so no judgment either way. But I think it'll be fun for you to think about that and vocalize a little bit here together. So you got about 8 minutes. 8 minutes to talk. How many people, anybody brave enough to be like, man, it's a job right now? Feels like a job. Anybody at the like calling level where you're like, man, it's a calling? Anybody just don't want to answer? Yeah, it's totally cool too. Well, here's the beauty of it. Here's the beauty, is that anything, I know, it's good, it's good. Here's the secret, is that anything can be a calling, right? Like if you want to make an impact, you want to make a difference, like you could be, I mean, there's a gal that works at the UDF here in Newtown I watch her interact with other customers, and she is like a ray of sunshine, right? Like she just lights up the UDF. Do you know what I mean? I doubt she's sitting there thinking, I'm called to UDF. That's probably not her lifelong plan, her lifelong dream. But she is living out that calling in the middle of that role right now, you know? So for you, it's just an interesting thing to think about is that the way God describes and talks about career and work is this idea of vocation, that He created a personal, purposeful path for you to follow and to think about. Let's move on to our hands here real quick, the last 5 minutes. So what does that look like, though? 27. So basically, we get to model what God does. So you think about what God did, Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And what God does is He creates and He cultivates. Okay, and if you think about what we do as men and what we love to do, like we love to problem solve, we love to like come up with ideas, like we're all creating in different ways. Some of you are cooks, some of you work with wood, some of you create business deals, right? Like God designed us to create and to cultivate. Like that's the call that He has in our life. God cultivated His work by building an environment where it could flourish, right? So originally Garden of Eden, but earth, us, right? The church, right? This is a place where God's work can flourish and grow, and we get to be a part of that. Mankind was made to imitate God's work by creating and cultivating and by helping develop God's world to its full potential. So here's the cool part. This idea of calling and vocation is not just kind of psychobabble. It's really the idea of like God saying, hey, partner with me in what I'm doing on earth. That's a pretty cool invitation, right? Like that's a pretty cool thing to partner with. It's like what God's doing here on earth probably is pretty important, pretty awesome. And He's tapping us on the shoulder and saying, hey, I got something I want you to do. I got this little slice of my kingdom carved out for you. And do you guys remember in like junior high history learning about like fiefdoms, right? A fiefdom, everybody remember what that is? It's like a little plot of land that really like the king owns, but he lets you run it, like you're the lord of the fief. Is that somewhat close there? Yeah. Well, that's what God's inviting us to do, is he made us stewards over his creation to care for it. Some of you guys that I know well are amazingly caring dudes. Like I got friends in this room that like lead tables here at Authentic Manhood, and they'll sit out in the parking lot with people for an hour after this talking because that guy shared that he got fired or he's struggling in his marriage, that you just care. Bring order to it. Some of you guys are the most organized people ever, right? Like I'm so glad that I'm not in my boss's role because like I suck at spreadsheets, right? Like I'd bring order to nothing. The church would have no electricity right now if I was running it. And they develop it. Some of you guys develop business areas. You developed companies. Some of you guys benefit mankind, and all of that is for the glory of God. I want to end with just this thought, and then I'll explain why there's risk cards on your table, in case you're wondering. I liked building intrigue, and I liked risk. So Tim Keller was it's not Time Keller, it's Tim Keller, was a Presbyterian pastor, passed away a few years ago, but just an amazing thought leader, wrote a ton of deep, critical stuff. He said, God left creation with deep, untapped potential for cultivation that people were to unlock through their labor, their work. And we are called to stand in for God in the world, exercising stewardship over the rest of creation in his place as vice regents. We share in doing the things that God has done in creation. And listen to this, bringing order of chaos, creatively building civilizations out of the material of physical and human nature. People, caring for all that God has made. This is a major part of what we were created to be. Work is rearranging the raw material of God's creation in such a way that it helps the world in general and people in particular thrive and flourish. And the idea I want to leave you with here with risk, and I don't know if anybody grew up playing Risk like me. I could love me some Risk on a rainy day, out under the patio with the Baimashees and Madeira, right? We played a lot of Risk. And in Risk, you get assigned like countries, right? They're just dealt out, and they're like, oh, I got Alaska. Well, here's what I want you to think about, is that God has dealt out a card to you, and he's like, this is it, right? Like and I know we're not supposed to say what we do, but like you're in the medical field, and this is where I have you, and and this is the little slice of my kingdom that I want you to create in, and I want you to cultivate in, and it's personal, and it's purposeful, and here it is, right? And for each of us, it's different. Like in this room, we'd have a litany of different things, little slices of God's kingdom that he's given to you. But I just want to challenge you on this first week of 5 that it's not just a job, right? No matter what you do. If you're in law enforcement, facilities management, you're a goofy pastor like me, like whatever you do, it can be more than just a job. That the God of the universe is like, hey, I'm inviting you into this thing, man. Like run the fiefdom for me, right? Like run it. You can stand in my place here, and you can create, you can cultivate, you can love people, you can care about them. So that's the challenge as we jump off tonight. So I wonder for you, like, what's the takeaway? Is it needing to think more about your life, your job as a vocation, a calling, than just a job? Is it the idea of thinking about it being more personal and purposeful? Or is it the idea of where can I create right now, no matter what you do, and where can I cultivate in the relationships that God has in front of me? I'm going to pray and we'll be done. I'd love for you, I'm weird with like little objects, so take a Risk guy home. Put it somewhere. Throw it on a nightstand and a drawer. Anytime you look at it, be reminded that God has given you a little slice of his kingdom to manage. Let me pray. God, thank you for these men. Thank you for the work that you give us, that it's a blessing to be able to work, that there's men right now in our country, in our world that would love to work, but they're injured, they're hurt, they're unable to. We thank you for the money and the way that we can provide for our families through our jobs. We thank you that there are people that are longing for a job, and a lot of us have them, so help us not to take them for granted. Thank you that you want us to partner with you in what you're doing, and you invite us into that. lift up the next 4 weeks. Just pray they'll be awesome. And we love you in your name. Amen.